We are back, folks, here on WLTH 1370 AM. Please give us a call, 219-885-1379.
The clock is ticking.
Yes, that number again is 219-885-1360.
You're going to miss us when we're gone.
1371. It's 6:35 p.m. And, well, this is probably the biggest news story of this week thus far, Rev. And, you know, this has been brewing for a long time. As I think you probably know if you paid any attention to the news or anything culturally the last week, a jury has found R. Kelly, the R&B singer, guilty in his federal trial where he faced charges relating to the alleged sexual exploitation and physical abuse of children. Mm-hmm. The jury came to a decision on Monday afternoon following 23 days of the trial starting August 18th, with included 50 witnesses.
Yeah.
50 witnesses overall, according to CNN. The R&B singer had been the subject of accusations for sexual abuse for decades, according to the New York Times. But this was his first criminal trial since he was acquitted on child pornography charges in 2008. He's been in federal custody since 2019 and continually denies any wrongdoing, as you heard his lawyer in the intro state. Rev, when you saw this, what was your first thoughts?
Well, you know, I wasn't super familiar with R. Kelly, you know, his bio or anything. And so as I read into it and found out, you know, his backstory, I ultimately came to the question of how did he get so far along, you know, growing up in the life that he grew up with, and no one took note of it, no one intervened.
Yep.
The most that anyone did in shaping his future was telling him, hey, instead of focusing on basketball, you should focus on music.
Yeah.
It was just like the only thing people saw in him was how they could get their pleasure from him.
Right. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Rev, because I want to give all credit to the Funky Academic on YouTube, Eremi Osei Frimpong. He covered this last night. Uh-huh. And I was shocked when I heard some of the footage. I went looking down the rabbit hole myself, looking for the footage of R. Kelly's brother, talking about how him and R. Kelly were both raped by their older sister. Now, listen to this. Now, I have to warn you guys, there's no cursing on here, but it is a little bit graphic. If you have, if you're triggered easily or if you have young ears around, there's no cursing, nothing FCC unapproved, but it is, it's definitely not.
It's not Disney.
It's not
Disney. Old Disney anyway.
It's not Disney, but this is R. Kelly's older brother.
She just took my head and put it down by a private part, and she told me to lick her private parts. So of course I didn't know what I was doing.
At 6 years old.
6 years old. And she was like, stick your tongue out, lick it hard, lick it fast.
She's giving you
instructions. And she started giving me oral sex with her mouth. So she turned around and laid me down, and she sat on me, and she took her hand and she grabbed my private part, and she put it in.
Wow, that is R. Kelly's brother. I think it's Carrie Kelly, talking about how their 16-year-old sister molested him when he was 6 years old. She was 16. She did the same to R. Kelly. R. Kelly was also allegedly molested by an aunt. And, this goes back to this sort of, and I know nobody wants to hear this now because R. Kelly, I think he's guilty of sin. I remember when he married Aaliyah. Mm-hmm. I'm old enough to remember that. I actually went to school with one of his cousins here, and they told us before the story broke. None of us believed it. We were like, man, R. Kelly ain't married no Aaliyah. She's only 15 or something. And they were like, no, they're married now. The family met her and everything. And then the story broke, and we were like, oh, okay, well, I guess maybe it was the truth after all. So that was 1994. That was when I was starting at Emerson, 1994. So I've known R. Kelly was a creep since at least 1994, and so is everybody else who listens to R&B or hip hop music. Everybody trying to pretend that they don't and didn't know R. Kelly was a creep. They're just lying, you know. They're just lying. He was on trial for it again in 2003. I'm sorry, in 2008. He was at he. That's when the tape came out. The tape came out. The sex tape with him and a teenage girl came out in 2002, but the trial for it was 2008, and he was acquitted of child molestation. Infamously, the cartoon show The Boondocks covered it and parodied a lot of what people's rationality was for their continual support of R. Kelly, in spite of the fact that he was obviously somebody who was very, very sick. And so I'm not making any excuses for R. Kelly. R. Kelly is exactly where he should be. But I am noticing with this story that we are very comfortable with the black man as the predator. You know, we're very comfortable with that narrative, but not as the prey. Okay,
Yeah.
As you hear Carrie just say, to R. Kelly and his brother were prey to their older sister and to their aunt. Okay, they were prey, but we never talk about that. I went down the rabbit hole some more and looked for this. Got to thank the funky academic again for bringing this up. I was shocked hearing this. Chris Brown, another black celebrity who has been very vilified over the past 10, 15 years since he assaulted his girlfriend Rihanna. He talked about how he was molested at 8 years old by a woman, and listen to how it is actually covered by a news organization.
Hi, Hollywood Lifers. This is Holly Buzz with Bonnie
and Chloe.
Chris Brown gave another interview in which he told The Guardian that he actually lost his virginity at the age of 8.
What? That is crazy.
That is so young.
So crazy. And actually, HollywoodLife.com, we've spoken to a source close to Rihanna who says she's not surprised because he was basically a beast in bed and that they used to have crazy sex together. This is a little TMI for me, Bonnie. I don't really want to know that Chris Brown lost his virginity at 8.
Well, you do know, and you're talking about it. And Rihanna felt that it actually, because he got started so young, that's why he was so good.
I'm blushing right now. I don't know if you can see.
And apparently, once they had made up, when they got back together last year, our source tells us that Rihanna felt that the makeup sex was just wild. So now we know another reason why they got back together.
Yeah, well, and now they're not together anymore. So maybe she kind of got over the fact that his sex was so great.
So that's how we talk about black boys being molested in our culture. That's how we talk about black boys. 8 years old, that young man was raped. Call it what it was. He was molested. There's no such thing as an 8-year-old boy being sexually, being able to even be
make sexual decisions.
Yeah, make any sexual decisions. Okay,
and this way, if it were a girl we were talking about, there would be no question about saying that no, she was not being adventuresome. She was not exploring her independence. She was manipulated. She was abused. She was treated as a tool for someone else's pleasure.
Yes.
Because that's all an 8-year-old could be. They're not able to make decisions to actively participate.
Of course not.
At that age.
Absolutely. Of course not. But as we see the 6-year-old R. Kelly, the 8-year-old Chris Brown, these young men are abused by women in this case. And since we as a culture have not come to terms with the idea of women as predators or girls as predators in any way, then we end up, what we do is we let Chris Brown or R. Kelly, like you said, Rep, nobody intervened in any way while this was happening to R. Kelly. Nobody intervened when they saw the early signs of his abuse and how he was, doing things with young girls, even when he was fresh out of high school himself. They just wanted him to make money off of him. So we wait till R. Kelly or Chris Brown becomes a predator, a monster, and then we go, that's the big black monster right there. That's the big black monster. That's the big black man that you have to be afraid of right here. Meanwhile, the people who help make them that way, they get off scot-free. Nothing happens to them. And the cycle continues because we're going to have more generations of Chris Brown. Let's look in whenever we have the stories of the teachers who are having sex with their students. Whenever you see Mary Kay Letourneau or somebody like that, you have, I mean, you have comedians. I wish teachers were like that when I was a kid, or whatever. It is treated as by men and by women. This is a bi-gender thing right here, because men and women both downplay what we're doing in creating people like R. Kelly and Chris Brown. And this is the narrative that we're comfortable with: the black male predator, not the black male prey. And that's why, unfortunately, we will not learn our lesson from R. Kelly. The great Chuck D from Public Enemy, stated, the question needs to be asked: how does R. Kelly, whenever he gets out of jail, if he ever gets out of jail, how does he recover and recreate himself and sort of reform
He
himself?
doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Legally, I mean, that is one of the few crimes that exists that even if you do your time, you're still
Technically.
Yeah, you never technically do your time for that.
Right, you're a sex offender
for life,
forever, and so that's the narrative we're comfortable with. We're comfortable with the black man as an irredeemable sex villain. That's, if you look at the drug laws we have in this country, marijuana, cocaine, both of them are about going back to Harry Anslinger, the first drug czar, who said that if we had legal cocaine, that black men would get it and rape white women, or black men would use marijuana to tempt white women, and with jazz music and cigarettes, with marijuana cigarettes. So once again, it's always about the black male predator, but we don't want to deal with how R. Kelly, how Chris Brown, how these men get to this place. I look at Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson talked about some years ago, and it was like a 1 or 2 day story, that when he was a very young boy, he was taken into a abandoned building by a man and sexually molested. And it was a 1 day story. It was like a 1 or 2 day story. Nobody talked about it again. But we're okay with the narrative of Mike Tyson as the guy who bit Evander Holyfield's ear, the guy who served time for rape and sexual battery in prison, the monster, the guy who tried to fight all those cops that time. We're all good with that narrative, but we're not going to talk about the 9-year-old boy or the 8-year-old boy who was scared and taken into a abandoned building and raped by a predator. And we force these people to live with that their entire lives, for the rest of their lives. And if they show any type of effects of that, which unfortunately abusers do abuse, we just say you're irredeemable, off to prison, off to the gulag, and that's where you go forever. But once again, we don't go to the source. We don't go to the source.
And at this point, I mean, R. Kelly's in his 50s.
Yeah.
It may very well be that there may not be much of anything you can do.
No, unfortunately.
For him as an individual, but he's got children.
Yeah,
too.
he does. Yeah, he does.
What does this say about them?
Ooh, one of his children is transgender. Did you see that?
Transgender.
Yes, his daughter or son. I believe she was a daughter who turned into a son, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the opposite that we usually see. I believe R. Kelly had a daughter who decided that she was a boy. Okay, and that was the reason they fell out. And R. Kelly and his ex-wife fell out was because R. Kelly's daughter/son was transitioning, and he refused to support that. And so this is what I'm saying. The next generation.
Wait a minute. Is this the one, Andrea Kelly?
Yeah, Andrea, that was his wife, and they have a daughter together who is transgender, or a son that is transgender now.
Now, the story, the narrative that she puts forth is that their marriage ended because of abuse.
Well, that may have been part of it. They also have a transgender.
But here's
child.
the thing. Now it's, because of this, it's probably, the popular thing to say that, well, he abused me too. He abused me too.
Well, I mean, maybe he did. You know what I mean? A lot of people who are in that.
Yeah. But I'm saying now this other stuff that you're saying, it could also be why their marriage ended. The point I'm making is
Jay Kelly. Jay Kelly is his daughter. Yeah, Jay Kelly is his daughter with Andrea Kelly that came out as a transgender boy. Okay, go ahead, Rev.
So there's there's a lot of things that could come into play as to why him and Andrea Lee. But what struck me about the fact that he and Andrea Lee were married was the big narrative is R. Kelly, he's stuck on young girls. He can only get with young girls. But he was married to Andrea Lee for how many years was it?
I don't know. Let me look up.
It wasn't for 1 or 2 years.
No, they were married, I think, for close to a decade. I will look that up right now.
Close to a decade.
I'm pretty sure it was
Yeah.
like 8 years or something.
19. They got married in 1996. They were divorced in 2009.
Oh, so they were married 13 years. So that's a very long time.
That's a very long time. And in all that time, and I know during this time period, if you so much as picked up the phone and called and said, my husband, my wife is beating me, the police would respond and somebody had to go to jail.
Right. Either you or him.
Somebody went to jail that day. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know, so 13 years, you know, I don't know. Because again, I've listened to his music very little, to be honest.
Right.
I know of a couple of his songs. I thought he was okay, you know. I thought he was a little bit on the rough side
raunchy.
to me. A little bit on the raunchy side.
He's known for his raunch. Let's be real.
You know, and so I just wasn't all that interested in it.
Right.
But all of this other stuff, this has been going on for some time. And, you know, even to the extent of, you know, from what I understand, he maintained his ties to Chicago.
Yes, he did.
And he maintained his ties to the inner city and to the hood. And that means that he maintained his ties to people who were struggling.
Yep.
He maintained his ties to people that looked at connecting to him as a way of getting out of the struggle. Just like other kids in those neighborhoods look at sports as a way to get out of the struggle. Other kids look at becoming a rapper as a way of getting out of the struggle. Well, there were some people that looked at connecting to R. Kelly as a way to get out of the struggle. There were some parents who looked at R. Kelly as a way for their daughters to get out of the struggle.
Yes.
And
yep.
We're not gonna deal with that.
No, I'm glad you're reading my mind practically, bro. Because that was the next thing I was going to talk about. Aaliyah, her uncle recently came out and said that his sister, because her, let me give some context. Her uncle Barry Hankerson is a very famous manager in the music industry. He was R. Kelly's manager.
Okay.
And he's the one who introduced him to Aaliyah. So that's how Aaliyah got hooked up with R. Kelly, because Barry Hankerson owned Black Ground Records and was R. Kelly's manager. And so he introduced him to his niece. And Barry Hankerson also was married to Gladys Knight. So Aaliyah grew up around Gladys Knight, grew up a part of the music industry around her family, Barry Hankerson, Gladys Knight, and these types of people. And he introduced her to R. Kelly in the early 90s. He says now that while he didn't know that R. Kelly was having a sexual relationship with his niece, her mother, Diane Houghton, allegedly knew about the sexual relationship that R. Kelly had. Now, R. Kelly apparently started having relations with Aaliyah when she was 13. That's if you listen to the trial, one of the backup dancers actually walked in on R. Kelly performing a sexual act on Aaliyah when she was younger than high school age. Okay, so Diane Houghton, which is Aaliyah's mother, allegedly knew about this, and now Barry Hankerson and his sister are in this war, this fight, because he's saying that, you know, she knew about it and he wanted to break all ties with R. Kelly. He's saying that his own sister, Aaliyah's mother, wanted to continue to make music with R. Kelly for her daughter, even after they found out that it had come out that they had been married, that he would have a sexual relationship with them. And that opens up a whole nother can of worms. And it goes back to the Michael Jackson case and goes back to all these other cases about people who leave their kids. Now, we got to go to a break in a second, Rev. But I want to talk to you when we get back from this break, because I wanted to talk to you about it, because when the week you were gone, I covered Simone Biles and them. You are a parent. I am not a parent. Hopefully, I will be one day at some point. But yeah, I wanted to know, how do parents understand? How do parents vet who they can leave their children around? So please, everybody. We'll be right back here on WLTH 1370 AM. You don't want to miss that. We'll be right back after this.
Daryl's Auto Tech, located at 15